Hi, my name is Andrew Gomez, and I will be presenting on the article Language Learners Restructure Their Input to Facilitate Efficient Communication by Fedjikina, Yeager, and Newport. The article mentions the structural similarities of world languages and how the biases of language learners may change language over time. Through 2 experiments, this study investigates the possibility that language learners are restructuring language in specific ways to communicate information more effectively and efficiently. Through the examination of the world's languages, linguists have found linguistic universals which refer to patterns that occur across languages. 2 theories for the generation of these patterns are discussed in the article. One argues that these universals arise because of innate constraints specific to language and not characteristic of other aspects of cognition, while the other states that languages are shaped over time by constraints on human cognitive mechanisms and pressures associated with language acquisition and use. As an alternative to the typological tests of linguistic universals, whose generalizations informed these perspectives, the authors chose to use miniature artificial languages in attempts to view language shaping via the input to a participant and their subsequent output. Important to this study is the concept of case marking, which the article defines as the addition of markers on nouns, typically prefixes or suffixes added to the noun stem, for example, to indicate which noun is the subject and which is the direct object of the verb. The 2 experiments would expose learners to languages that do not have efficient case marking, where the researchers were interested in if the learners would deviate from the input to make the language more efficient. Participants of both studies were undergraduate students at the University of Rochester who were monolingual native English speakers. Participants were required to visit a laboratory on 4 days where they were exposed to nouns through static images and audio, and sentences through computer-generated video and audio depicting transitive actions. Participants were tested on their comprehension of the language by selecting the doer of an action given 2 static pictures and hearing a novel sentence. Participants also completed a production test which involved them describing a transitive scene with the language they learned during the experiment. The experiments used identical procedures where the only variations were small differences in the input languages. The 2 input languages both contained 8 verbs and 15 nouns and were inefficient versions of a verb-final language with flexible constituent orders, a dominant subject-object-verb order and a less frequent object-subject-verb order, which contained case marking but was not conditioned on animacy. In Experiment 1, the grammatical object was optionally case marked and inanimate nouns occurred only in the object position, where in Experiment 2, the grammatical subject was optionally case marked and animate nouns occurred as subjects only. In Experiment 1, object animacy had a significant effect on case marker use, where participants used more case markers on animate objects compared to inanimate objects, even though this was not the pattern of their input language. There was also a significant main effect of constituent order, where objects were case marked more often when the object preceded the subject. In Experiment 2, there was a main effect of constituent order, where participants were more likely to case mark the subject if the sentence word order was subject-object-verb. Findings from this study indicate that language learners are biased towards communicatively efficient linguistic systems as shown through their restructuring of the input languages, and are consistent with the hypothesis that the participants would produce output with case marking which deviated from the inefficient optional case marking of the input. Regarding connection to the required reading, both the Fedjikina et al. And Conwall et al. Articles discuss the use of miniature artificial language experiments to examine language reshaping during acquisition, specifically to investigate influences which may affect efficiency of communication and/or accuracy in regards to the idea that communicative pressures can act as influence during acquisition. Additionally, the findings of the Fedjikina et al. Article provide support for the view that ambiguity avoidance forms during language acquisition, and that ambiguity avoidance does not occur when ambiguity can be easily resolved through context, showing that learners avoided ambiguity that would have remained globally unresolved, which is somewhat related to the Conwall et al. Findings that with specific circumstances of acquisition, language users can exploit information in the input to converge on an optimally configured lexicon. Thank you.